It is my pleasure to call to order the Wednesday, July 2nd meeting of the Freeport Planning Board. It's a couple minutes after 6. Thanks to everyone for being here just ahead of the 4th of July holiday. Hopefully everybody's excited. We're certainly having summery weather. Moving my bike way too fast here, so, feeling it a little bit. We'll dive right in. Item number 1, as always, is the information exchange, and sub-item 1 is a report on items reviewed by the Freeport Project Review Board. Kyle?
Hi, everyone. So the PRB at their June meeting approved 2 applications. We had a site plan review application by Green Pest Defense at 298 US Route 1. They're proposing to demo their existing office building there, put up a new 3,500 square foot footprint building with a parking area to the side and the rear. So that was approved. So that'll be a nice improvement to that lot. 298 US Route 1, south. And then 23 Depot Street, which is the host tower, went before the board for a design review certificate to make some improvements to that building. One that didn't require design review approval was just re-siding the building in a very similar siding to what's existing. But they're also adding in 5 skylights to the roof and 3 new windows to the tower portion to kind of open up the second floor area of the tower, I believe. So I think they'll have some future plans for new uses going in the building, but for now it was just the design review application. So, all good stuff there. Second thing here, the Village Corridor Initiative. So just want to say thanks for everyone that came to the event and the talk on June 17th. For anyone who missed it or wants to go back and watch it, the video is on the homepage of the town website. So that's the Jeff Speck talk. And then this last bullet, Brett is not going to give the update. I will. So the consultant's basically going back and starting to work on analyzing the corridor. And really, we should expect to hear back and see something new from them in the fall that we can report back to the board on as we start to do some of that build-out analysis work and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that. Design review, just wanted to confirm with everyone. I do have it set up on the calendar on the website that we'll be having that extra meeting this month on the 23rd. To review a text version of the design review ordinance update. We do have those placeholders for the graphics, so we'll at least be able to tell where text standards will be supported by images. We just won't have the images themselves. But I just wanted to confirm once again, now that we're a little closer, that people are good with that July 23rd meeting date. So. Right. I think so. We'll get agendas out probably for that late next week, and then we'll follow up with the materials the week after. And then, so the last thing not on the agenda, but I wanted to kind of touch on with you all is LD 1829. It's new state law that passed on June 20th, so just recently. This is basically a follow-up to LD 2003. It kind of clarifies on some of the things that were touched on in there and adds more standards. And it's going to be something that is going to come up over the next year in a bunch of our discussions. So as of now, we have until next July to implement a lot of these changes. But that might change. But I at least wanted to touch on what some of the things covered in there are. Some of it's things that we're already talking about, so it'll be fairly easy to integrate some of this into the conversations we were already planning on having. But it is going to cause a number of things that will be required to change in our ordinance that we weren't necessarily looking at. So just to highlight a few points in there. So one is that it's basically going to require anywhere that you have public water and sewer in your growth area that you can't have a minimum lot size requirement more than 5,000 square feet. So that's going to
Any
impact,
place in the state that has water and sewer
yep, in a growth area.
in a growth area can't have a lot size larger than
Yeah.
5,000 feet.
Pretty small.
That's pretty small.
That's an eighth of an acre.
Support the goals,
Yeah.
that is incredibly, what's the word? An affront to local control.
Yeah, I agree. But unfortunately.
That's where we are. So, yeah, I mean, it is a pretty big change. I mean, for.
On, Mitch?
No.
So yeah, even in some of our denser districts that have land per dwelling requirements, like well under that 5,000 square foot number, the minimum lot size requirement for the overall lot, might be more than 5,000 square feet. So it's also going to just bring up the question of, okay, if we now have the same minimum lot size requirement basically everywhere in our growth area, do we need to have so many unique zoning districts when they're all going to have the same lot size requirements anyway? So there's going to be a bunch of questions that we have to look at. The second piece of that is kind of a density piece. So in not looking at lot size overall, but lot area per dwelling, so there's going to be a requirement that municipalities can't exceed 1,250 square feet for the first 4 units on a site and 5,000 square feet for each additional unit after that. So as you'll see with this ties into some of the follow-up
Could you
points
say
here.
that again? That translates to a DU per acre?
So it means, no, it means that you can basically, so you have this 5,000 square foot lot that's going to be allowed essentially everywhere, 1,250 square feet per unit. So it means you can do, on this new minimum lot that's allowed everywhere, you can do a 4-unit building on that lot. So every 5,000 square foot lot that's created, you could have a 4-unit structure. That's what it's saying.
Anywhere in any growth area
Yeah.
in the state?
Yep. Wow. So then, kind of tied into that, is changing the definition
Party road.
of subdivision. So if you know, subdivision is either dividing, land into 3 lots, or, it was previously if you divided a structure up into 3 or more units, that was subdivision. They're changing the unit side of that, so it's now a division of a structure into 5 or more units. So if you have a single structure and you're dividing it into 3 or 4 units, it's no longer considered a subdivision. To go along with that, a municipality can't require a 3 or a 4-unit structure to go to a planning board, or in our case, project review board, for review and approval. So what it's basically saying is that anywhere you have to, in your growth area with public water and sewer, you have to allow a 5,000 square foot lot with 4 units on that lot, and it's allowed through a building permit
We
only.
shouldn't do it.
So,
There's,
That-
yeah. I mean, we'd be-
What's the point of having a design ordinance? That's what they're saying? There'd be no design
I think
ordinance
you can
review?
still regulate things like design. I'm not sure. I don't
There's
think.
also other,
Who would be the enforcement mechanism if not the PRB?
Code officer.
So, design review could still probably apply. These are things we'll have to look at. But design review could probably still apply, looking at the design of it. You just wouldn't be able to look at the use of it. Like, right now, there are single-family homes in design review that only require a building permit, but they still might have to go to PRB for design review approval. So it would be a similar situation.
So when they talk about subdivision, now, didn't we change our subdivision? Is that 3 or more units that are condo-wise, or are those apartments? Because we talked about changing subdivision
Yeah, so
from,
we already exempt
Yeah,
if
we already changed our subdivision law.
Yeah, if you're in a single multifamily building.
You don't have to go through subdivision.
But you still go to the PRB
Yeah.
for site plan, but this is saying that you can't go to the PRB. It has to be allowed through a building permit.
Yeah.
but it's just one it doesn't say, like, if you have, I was going to say big acreage, but it doesn't have to be a big acreage. If you had 1 acre and you wanted to divide it into 4 lots now,
Yep.
that, or does this only apply to a single structure? My eyes are not that
I
good.
think this is just single structure.
Single structure,
Yeah.
okay. So it doesn't
lots-
change the threshold for creating new lots?
No, that's still the same.
So
But
you still, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a big point here is it's going to create a lot of little changes. You know, we have to amend the definition of subdivision. We now have to introduce new land uses, basically, to call out triplexes and quadplexes as their own unique uses, separate from multifamily. So multifamily is now going to be a structure with 5 or more units instead of 3. And then we're going to have to go through zoning districts, you know, by zoning district and, you know, see where these things are allowed and where they're not allowed in. The last piece here that I have on here, the last point, is kind of a different topic than density. It talks about building height. So this LD 1829 also says that any municipality must allow an affordable housing development to exceed any height restriction in the municipality by 1 story or 14 feet. So, you know.
Whichever is.
What?
Whichever is less? I don't know, like if somebody wants to put a 20-foot story, they can't do that? Is that what I'm gathering? It would be, the 14-foot would be the limit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if someone regulates their height only by stories,
Gotcha.
you know,
Okay.
you would be able
That's
to
why
do
it's
one
both
more
ways.
story.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair
yeah.
enough.
So that's on top of the 44 or 55 feet we're doing already?
In our case, that would be 69 feet. That's
Yeah,
what
right,
that's
that's right.
saying.
So if it's specifically, if it's an affordable housing development.
Obviously.
Yeah. So,
And that would only actually, is that definition mean 50% of the units?
yeah,
That's like the state.
yeah, that's
Right.
what came out of
In
LD
other words, it would
2003.
be a mixed-use development, but 50% of the units.
Yeah, it could be like the Varney Heights project, you know,
Yep, yep,
was
yep,
designated
yep,
an
yep.
affordable housing development,
Yep.
something like that. Yep. So, yeah, I mean, that's relevant partly to our topic of discussion tonight and going forward. A lot of this will be relevant. I think when we talk about, you know, in the fall, when we're starting to look at the C1 and C3 zoning standards, like we're going to have to look at, okay, are we going to start to bring some of this in as we do that? And then do the rest, you know, the other districts, you know, the village districts downtown after that? Or are we going to look to do it all at once? We'll have to kind of work through what the best strategy is there. But I just wanted to highlight some of this early on so people are at least thinking of it or have it in mind if they hear these kinds of things mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, I mean, what the fallout is in other communities as well. And I think,
Yeah.
I mean, the danger that I see here is there's always workarounds to this kind of stuff, right? I mean, you could say, all right, sure, you can have your 1,250 square foot, you know, minimum density or minimum lot size. Am I saying that right? Density per unit, you can have your 5,000 square foot lot, but you need 300 feet of road frontage, you know? And so, like,
Yeah.
there are ways to sort of still tailor these things to what the community wants. It's just, I think the you know, I don't want to, I haven't really looked into it. It seems like maybe there's some ideas in there that are worth considering for their own merits, but the frustrating part about it is just the process being like, okay, we just went through this, took a huge amount of time, now we got to do it again. That's really
Yeah, it
obnoxious.
makes it difficult when we're already starting to think about a lot of these things, and we have a kind of, we're starting to work towards a plan of implementation, and then, right, even if this is along the same ideas of why we're doing some of the other
Right,
work, it's
yeah.
just going to cause
Or you-
extra
I mean,
work along.
There's tons of, or we could reintroduce a minimum
But
lot
something-
coverage, maximum impervious surface area. I mean, there's like other ways to regulate this stuff. It's a bummer that we have to.
So we'll have to wait to see
Or
if
not,
there's any rulemaking that comes out to clarify any of these things, or, you know, what other places are doing, if there's any follow-up legislation, so, yeah.
All right, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, given how little we know about it and how much other stuff we have. If that's okay with folks, can we agree to be communally frustrated by the possibilities here?
Well,
and
I
just
actually
take it on another-
I don't agree. I don't think we should be talking about working around this. I think it has a real important purpose to it.
I'm not saying that that's going to be the thing that happens. I'm just saying that it's like, I think this is not the end of the story. It's like, oh, okay, we adopt everything. I think there's still going to be like community input. There's still going to be maybe looking at, you know, growth areas in the future, that sort of thing. I mean, I know we're doing the comp plan and everything.
I don't understand.
But I agree that I think there are ideas in here that are worth pursuing on their own merits. It's not that the whole
I think
thing
all of
is-
them are probably worth pursuing. If they had presented them to us as suggestions from the state to solve a problem that we've identified and are working to solve, and which many of these things would solve, it would be very different than the state usurping local control. And now we have a problem with that 55-foot, because I don't want a 69-foot building on Depot Street. So they could suggest that, and we could take that someplace, but it is very frustrating.
Yep. No, I share the
And
frustration.
I don't know why the rest of the council, why other towns haven't been objecting to the control from the state.
Well, I think the state is taking control because individual towns have
Refused.
all of these concerns that have to do with NIMBYism, basically.
This, of course,
No,
is true.
And
But that's what local control's about, planning your own town,
Right.
Yeah, but there's a big problem that nobody's facing. which is
Collectively
a housing
across the
crisis.
state, right.
We have a huge housing crisis. That's why we need, that's why,
All right, it is what
I
it
have
is,
nothing
Stan.
against the state, moving on this, because we're not moving on this.
Nobody is.
Okay.
Lewiston is. Lewiston's the.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there are communities that I think are good
Yeah.
examples of, and maybe those communities
Brunswick.
have allowed a lot of, yeah, and I mean, Westbrook and Gorham, I think, have a better reputation in some ways. But anyway, all right, I want to move on. Item number 2 is a review of the minutes from the April 2nd Planning Board meeting. I believe we had a full house that night.
No, I was missing.
Oh,
Our last meeting was,
this was,
This
it was not April 2nd.
this was 3 meetings ago, right? Oh, right, this is when you were in Italy?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions, comments?
There's one, page 5 and 6. It says foreign-based code, and that should be form-based code.
Oh, foreign-based codes, yes. That's a good catch. Second to last line, I see, on page
And
5.
And then 6, it's,
Okay,
oh, it's another one, too.
that's hopefully a find replace for somebody to make that change. Does anybody have other thoughts, questions, comments? Thorough as usual, thank you, Sharon.
Welcome.
Do I hear a motion
Any
to?
other changes from Rosemary?
Yeah, from did you have any, yeah, sharp-eyed, even though you weren't there, now you can't vote on your own changes.
Everybody's grateful.
Yeah.
I know.
I move we adopt the minutes from the April 2nd meeting.
Second from Dave, all in favor, who are present? All right, that is unanimous. Item number 3, oh my gosh, sorry, is a discussion with North Star Planning regarding comprehensive plan update. This will focus on state comments received during the state consistency review of the plan, public feedback, and any remaining comments by the board. Charles, you want to welcome, first of all?
Hey, long time no chat. Glad to see everyone here. Hope you're having a good summer. I come bearing good news. I think all of you have received it. So we, North Star Planning, submitted the Freeport Comprehensive Plan based on our last meeting, or last time I was here in April. We had a few changes to make. I think we had a good conversation about some few final items coming out of the March workshop. We submitted the package to the state. And I think in the fastest review I've ever seen from the state, they found the plan consistent with state requirements, and they sent over that letter to Caroline. And I think it's been shared with the board as part of this. So what the state review process is, they send it to about 4 or 5 different departments to review different sections, and they give their comments. So they look at what are the core requirements of mostly the inventory chapters, but they do look at the frontward part of the front part of the plan as well. When you look at the comments received, they are, some of the comments from the state are saying that your natural resources goals are excellent. There are others saying that the salt marsh sparrow is now a state endangered species. So things that have changed over the last few years. So the North Star team has kind of gone through their comments and identified like 16 16 changes, but 16 minor changes that the state had recommended. And most of these are coming out of the natural resources and water resources section, so it's just correcting data. There were some things saying that we were missing missing information on vernal pools. We went back from the state, we reached out to them, they sent us data, and we've included the vernal pools in Freeport. There was some language, they were really specific on some of these about like species names being italicized correctly. We've gone in and made those changes. There are some places, like some responses where if they asked for more, but it's not required, we really didn't go back and add it because we didn't feel it was super necessary to add to the inventory chapters. They're already super complex, pretty comprehensive. But for the most part, there are minor comments. Again, one I'd like to call is that swans are so rare, I wouldn't list them in this plan.
I like that one.
I like that.
That one was my favorite, and so unless we took out swans off the rare species list.
Did you replace it with what they did
Yeah,
recommend?
yeah. We added herons, bitterns, egrets.
One that I was curious about that somebody, I don't remember who, but somebody called out the existence of an invasive species map. I have never seen, I can't imagine, that seems to me like it would be a massive undertaking to keep that up to date.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. It's
I mean,
everywhere.
somebody could spend, the entire year just sort of cataloging my backyard. Actually, maybe it wouldn't be that hard. You just say all of this is invasive, everything, and
Yeah.
all the invasives are here.
So IMAP, they reference IMAP invasives, and that's kind of a crowdsourced GIS community managed data source. I don't know how the state uses it, but I think it's more of like professionals, community scientists who market. I've seen other comprehensive plans use it. We just have a discussion about what we know is in Freeport. We didn't feel that was like super, necessary to go in depth showing the mapping. It's not a required map. I think it's just, for reference.
I guess I wonder if it's worth just calling it out as like, hey, here's the thing you can check out if you're curious about what a neighbor might have.
What we're going to do is attach this letter from the state as part of just another appendix, just to say that, hey, by the way, this plan is consistent. We're just going to add it at the end, so there's a record of the state in part of the plan, and I think it'll, stay there as a reference to it. I just don't love using those community map programs because I don't want people using. Because the comp plan does get used however much as a resource for some things. People will go look at the map. It does have that kind of pull to it. And then the IMAP invasives it's a good resource if you're going to tackle it, but just I would leave it.
Okay, not official enough to be an official thing. Yeah, fair enough.
But we heard from a lot of all the departments, DMR, even DECD, the housing folks, and they all gave really glowing remarks. And again, I got notification. We submitted, I think, April 18th, and we heard back May 27th. And Tom had called me the state a week earlier saying like, hey, we're all good, but we have to wait for comments to come in. So cool. I think we had a very thorough process. We wrote the chapters to meet these standards, so it wasn't too much of a surprise to us. But we also heard from Tom that like the implementation table, the goals we developed, really strong, and the state was really supportive of this, and they did find it consistent, which is great.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
So is it they seem to have lots of, is a comment in praise to you guys. They seem to have lots of appreciation for what you did. And I don't know if they usually have as many gratuitous comments of praise, but they seem to be very praiseful.
I've seen, when I submitted my comp plans, I try to write them to the state rules that they have for it. It just makes it easier to develop, especially when you're working with smaller towns. I have seen, because all of these consistently, when they find it inconsistent, they will tell you why. And the detail they give here on, like, oh, you're missing one new endangered species, they will do that for whatever you're missing. They don't miss a beat typically, as you can tell with the level of detail. So even these comments, I was reading, I was like, all right, this is great. I was like smiling. I was like, yeah, this is fine. I don't like swans either. So, but I think, Mitch, to your point, I think it's when they're found consistent, this is what we see. These are the type of comments I'm used to seeing from the state. But I think there's even less so here. The natural resources team had a field day with this. So
Well, we owe you thanks for your work.
it was a pleasure. It was fun. But what we have, I have a list of about 15 of the changes we're making. They're really small. I will share them with Caroline and staff. It's just correcting. One of the notes Kate said, remove mention of swans, corrected title versus inland habitats, clarified figure 4 is correcting the right data, and just any of those changes that they made, like corrected 45 stream crossings to 51, corrected that there are 21 public water resources in Freeport, making those changes because maybe the data has shifted at the state, they have a new way of correcting it. Either way, they provided us with that updated data, so it took us really no time, and they put the page number on there too, which makes it a lot easier. So there's, again, we have not made, in my opinion, no substantial change to it. Like, we didn't really remove anything except swans, genuinely. That's the only thing. Didn't make any changes to the growth area. We did also, we did put out a Google survey on the website. I believe there was an email sent around it. We sent out an email to the list we collected. We received 4 comments. Some of them have people who had also submitted comment prior. And going through a lot of those comments, it's, at least from my perspective, they're conversations the board has had. So we had a lot of questions about how the size, location of growth areas, what is missing in the vision statement. We added recreation to the vision statement. We beefed up those goals. So I think a lot of the stuff that people did submit comment for or from the state were addressed or discussed, even talking about how we want to treat South Freeport, because we had a good conversation about having a growth area down in South Freeport, and we opted not to. So I think the board had a lot of these conversations at different points, took in a lot of feedback from the 5 workshops that we did, and it got into a point where obviously we're not going to get everything, but I think one thing to note with this plan is that we do blend in the downtown vision plan, the climate action plan, the dog bone working group report. So we were really able to capture a lot of those big previous planning elements to be part of this, but also let them breathe. So we didn't want to bring too much in from the climate action plan or the downtown vision plan, because this is just a comprehensive plan. I think that's all the feedback that we received. I don't think, Kyle, you guys had too many comments to the town.
I included one other email in the packet that looks like it was from 24, so I don't know if this is something you'd seen and implemented before.
From Carrie or from Alex Abbott?
Yeah, I saw those. Caroline shared that folder with me, so.
Yeah, that was the only other thing that I included in the packet.
Yeah, I thought those were good suggestions.
But yeah, this would really be the time for the board, if there's any kind of final comments or things that the board wants to look at. Otherwise, we'd be looking at bringing this back to the board at our August 6th meeting for the public hearing, to begin the kind of formal adoption process. I put the legal ad out to the paper yesterday, because we need to run the public hearing notice 30 days in advance, so that'll be going out on Saturday in the Times Record, so we're all set there. So yeah, we would hope to get the kind of finalized draft sometime, I think, next week, hopefully, so that way we have the kind of completed document available for people to review in advance of the public hearing. And then, you know, the preliminary timeline would be the planning board public hearing on August 6th. And then if all goes well there, council can set the public hearing at the September 2nd meeting with their public hearing on September 16th. And that would be adoption date. So that's the timeline we're looking at, unless there's, you know, major discussion points that people still want to have.
What concerns me is about South Freeport. There's a lot of information here that is addressed by, well, one concerned citizen, Martina Sullivan, and about the whole the parking, the traffic control, all of that. There's a lot of information here. And also the opening of the accessibility to public or the town. I don't know, are we supposed to address that now? I mean, there's a lot of feedback here.
Just in the letter or the email
Yes.
chain from.
Well,
No, it's at the end of the state letter, because she submitted that to the state.
Martina Sullivan, it's the Martina Sullivan letter, and I think none of it, I think all of it's interesting and good, but I don't know if any of it is plan worthy. In other words,
Are
so
we-
the issue, I mean, just go look at them one by one. Historic
Yeah.
preservation we've been through, and
Yeah.
I believe we should have a historic preservation ordinance. It's a very hot issue, but it's not
Something that we
It's not
should-
something we have addressed. We don't have one. She's saying we should have one. Okay,
Okay.
let's have that discussion. A welcome sign, that would be nice, but that's not our purview. Its own local government, again, that's what she wants to do. I don't know, take it up elsewhere.
Okay. so it's-
Speeding,
that's-
speeding is an issue across South Freeport Road.
Road, definitely.
Particularly, I mean, I went to the local meeting, you know, when the councilors were holding the meeting, and
Yeah.
90% of it was, a lot of people live on South Freeport Road from one end to the other, and they all have 60-mile-an-hour traffic in front of their
Right.
house and shouldn't. So,
Right.
okay, but.
I would also add that to some of the points in that email, it's like we do have signage in the comprehensive plan. Well, it does relate to recreation, but also we do have signage and,
Signage, we did discuss
And
the
it's
need for
discussed-
better signage.
it's
There's a plan
included.
for better signage.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the downtown section, but if we're having that conversation, then keeping that in the back of your head's important. And also, just because it's not in a growth area, it's in a rural area, there's mechanisms in the comp plan that talk about what does growth look like in a rural area, what happens in a rural area. Those areas aren't forgotten. So I think it's important to note that the comprehensive plan really focuses on how do you manage your growth, and where is growth going to be. And it's not ignore the other parts of town. And the future land use plan, I would say, does, bring up some of those points, especially in the narrative about how rural Freeport is important. And I think safety, traffic, that stuff that doesn't stop because it's not in a growth area. I can't speak for an independent South Freeport, but I think the other stuff is captured in the.
Yeah, I mean, to Mitch's point, I don't think there's anything in the current draft of the comp plan that would prevent the planning board from talking about further historic preservation work in the future, especially since that area is already in a historic district. If we were to build off of that and create a more robust historic preservation ordinance for that area, for, downtown, or, however it ended up being. And yeah, I mean, the planning board, right, when you do zoning work and policy recommendations, it's meant to be consistent with the comp plan. I don't think there's anything about this current comp plan draft where if you were looking at doing some historic preservation policy work, that you would say, oh, no, this is inconsistent with our current
Correct.
comp plan.
Correct. Now, the only question is, I don't know if anybody ever writes back to a woman like this. I don't know her at all, but I wish somebody would write back and say, if you want to talk about a local historic preservation, bring it up here, here, and here. Yes, you're the one.
Because you treat everyone the same, we got so many comments on the comp plan throughout it, so we haven't been sending individual responses, and we did make that clear on the website. If there's other concerns in there, we can pass them along for staff, but we haven't responded to them all individually. So if we were going to do one, we would go back and do them all
I
over
totally
the past
get it.
18 months.
It's just that these people, there might be a path for them to get what they want, or at least to discuss what they want, but they don't know the path.
Yes, so other things we could follow up, but I think we did get a lot of well-thought-out comments from various community members throughout the entire process.
Curious about the attempts to widen roads.
Right, that one too.
That,
That
like-
was like, wow.
Has the town tried to widen roads in South Freeport?
Well,
She had a dispute with where the width of the road was in front of her house. That's what she
So
had.
it sounds like
So
a
I guess
very,
for purposes of this, I would shift the board's focus back to kind of where Mitch was
Yeah.
going. Are there things in any of this content that you have tonight that you feel require some adjustments to the wording in the comp plan? Or do you feel like we have a draft that really reflects the balance of values amongst our entire community?
the one comment or question here in this, if you scroll to the very last page, or I guess technically the second to last page, where Martina has, in her email, she has 5 points. Number 4 is speeding, increased daily traffic, et cetera, and suggests that the town either doesn't have this or doesn't have the staff to enforce traffic laws. That to me seems like the sort of thing that a comprehensive plan could say, like, we want to foster, make it a goal, say, to like foster a safe community by enforcing existing traffic laws or something like that. Is that like inside the purview of a comp plan? I mean, I don't know. Or do we already have it in there in a way that's,
wouldn't
Or would that
all the
make a
laws
difference?
in place throughout all the ordinances already demand that?
well,
And so now the question is, if the town isn't doing its job to do what it said it would do, which is enforce
Right.
speeds.
that's where I, like, there's the sort of,
Somebody should
yes,
have
there is a
accounted.
speed limit, and if you were going to follow everything perfectly, anybody driving by my house at 26 miles an hour would get pulled over, right, and given a speeding ticket. And then there's the sort of reality of it, and I wonder if putting something in the comp plan gives a nudge, or if it doesn't matter. Because clearly there's a difference between the,
I don't feel like we can say,
Laws and
go hire
ordinance.
more policemen.
So but I would say that one of the goals on page 15 of the comp plan is promote complete streets, principles ensuring road projects incorporate features like wide sidewalks, separated bike lanes, widened shoulders, and traffic calming measures as part of regular roadway maintenance and improved projects.
right,
There.
yeah. And then
it's-
also maybe
that's
let's enforce existing laws while we're at it. But yeah,
Anytime you talk about the police department and the work they do, speed enforcement is the #1 topic that comes up. Like, anytime we bring Chief Goodman to a meeting,
Yep.
there's a lot of community interest until you get a ticket. But
the crime
it's
we
just
have.
like a hot topic across the board with the police department.
yep. Okay, so they're aware of it, and it's, I mean, it's certainly, I guess my interest here is just
And we're
to be
probably hiring
responsive.
if anyone's interested.
Oh, as it goes, it's getting bigger, one more person or something?
We just always have vacancies right now.
I just saw in the municipal bulletin
They were
that
short.
the latest Freeport hire just graduated from state
Police
troopers,
Academy.
or not state
Police
trooper, yeah,
Academy,
police
probably.
academy. There you go. So that was cool. Anyway, little tidbit from the municipal bulletin. Yeah, my only sort of point in pursuing this is like, is there a way that we can be responsive to these concerns? And I think we,
We can say we haven't.
Well, I do think, like, right, the planning boards, the comp plan isn't only for the planning board, but the planning board will be, one of the primary bodies working with the document, right? So when it comes to a topic like speeding, things like complete streets and traffic calming measures and things like that are the biggest way that the board could introduce a solution to an issue.
I think speeding
like that.
by and large is way outside the purview of the planning board. But
Yeah, and it's implicit that we're in favor of the laws being enforced. I mean-
Totally. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we don't have to say that specifically.
cool. Yeah, I thought the state comments were, we've already said, detailed and good, and if you guys are already on it and making those changes, and then I'm pretty comfortable that we're on a good track. I'm sure everybody noticed, or anybody who took the time to read through again the entire draft, there's still a hole where it says planning board chair letter. I have not drafted it. I am wondering if it's okay to have it be a planning board letter, though. And I'm still happy to write it. In fact, I'd like to write it. But I kind of feel like everybody's name should be there. I'm like less comfortable just putting only my name, because I feel like this has been very much a group effort. So is that's not like a state requirement that the chair write a letter, right?
No.
Okay, all
Just
right,
a nice touch.
Okay, so let's plan on, then when we do the public hearing, or hopefully ahead of time, maybe I can email it out, and we can't discuss via email, but we can at least, like, I know we have some editors in the crowd.
More rules.
So,
So the draft will be online by Monday at the latest.
Sorry, say that again?
The draft of the entire comp plan with the letter will be online by Monday at the latest. So I look forward to seeing what you work on over the weekend.
Oh, you got till Monday at the latest.
I can, I've known about this a long time. It's not that I haven't been thinking about it, I just, there's,
I didn't want to be pushy about it. I wasn't going to email you, but it's been,
I have not forgotten, believe
We
me.
are now on a very aggressive timeline because you have the notice and Kyle had to pre-run the ad because of the holiday and how long it takes to
Yep.
run an ad. So, thank you.
Can I make one other comment on the comp plan as it sits? Has anyone done a thorough review of all the pictures? There's beautiful pictures in there, and I thank you. I think it looks very nice. Like, I think one of the pictures in Economic Vitality was of a business that's shuttered, and things like that. I just wonder if somebody needs to just double-check all the pictures.
I think we got a lot of our pictures from the meeting house and one of their programs that they did.
Oh, right. That was a nice
Right, but like
program.
the juice place isn't there
Yeah, it is.
anymore, is it? Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Wanderlust, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Still there?
Very much still there.
We can do a really quick thumb through.
Just do a thumb through
Yep.
and make sure it all,
Yeah, I
I mean,
think,
obviously, it's
Yeah.
next year will look different than this year, but you don't.
No, valid point. Valid point on that, though.
that we should do one final look, Caroline. Everyone should if they can. I think there's some that we moved around. So I will take a look.
Yeah, I think at this point, the preference, so we don't have to redo formatting and all that, would be like, for Mitch's point, if it's economic vitality and it's no longer there, like, let's change it. But if just you like that building instead of this building, then let's stick with what the selection was. But something that really warrants a change, let's call it out. And then we'll leave it up, we'll put it out to North Star and they can do a swap. So if anyone has nothing to do over the weekend and they want to thumb through and they see anything that seems out of date, if you get me an email by 8 a.m. Monday morning, we will have them look at it. Great.
Any other final comments on this? We don't need to take action or anything, do we know?
no action.
Okay.
So we gained a month because of their review, right?
Yeah, it was definitely on the shorter end of the
Like we were thinking
expected time.
October, but now it could be in town council in
So
September.
if we had submitted, if we had submitted really before like June 2nd, we would have been fine. But I know that I submitted a comp plan, a different comp plan, middle, like, couple
You're thinking
weeks,
about fine on the,
couple weeks ago, and the state staff's on was on vacation for a couple weeks, so it's moved that deadline
We
too.
snuck in.
We timed it well.
Definitely.
Great. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
To you and the team, Ben, too.
Yeah. You'll be seeing North Star soon, don't worry.
I wasn't too worried.
Maybe not me, but
Right.
definitely North Star.
2 weeks, right? 3 weeks? 3 weeks, sorry, 3 weeks. Great. Item number 4 will be a public hearing on Chapter 21, the zoning ordinance, proposed amendments to discuss. Zoning text changes to Chapter 21, Section 413, which is Village Commercial 1, regarding an increase to the maximum building height allowed for certain areas along Depot Street. Thanks, Charles.
thank you.
Yeah, so this is what we talked about last time as part of the work plan discussion, coming to the board for public hearing with this change. So a couple of brief points. So the existing building height allowance in the Village Commercial 1 is 45 feet. There's no story limitation. That was removed, I think, a couple years ago. The downtown vision specifically highlighted this potential for a higher building height on Depot Street for a few reasons: the access to transit options, a number of infill development opportunities with all of the surface parking lots, And then the elevation kind of dropping down from Main Street. So there's that, perceived visual impact of the scale of those buildings would be a little less from the Main Street side. So we did a draft text amendment here that would allow for that 55-foot building height, specifically for lots that have road frontage on Depot Street. The one restriction we put in there was that the lot couldn't also have a lot line along Main Street, because you get those lots that, like the one that we're on right now, that extend all the way up to Main Street. And if we didn't limit that in any way, then, theoretically, not that this would ever happen, but, a lot like the town, like let's say someone else bought a lot on Main Street and one of the ones on Depot and combined it, they could build that 55-foot building along the Main Street
Isn't
side.
an easier way to do that to just say how many feet back from Depot Street?
I thought about that, but then,
If this works, it works. It solves the problem.
The one concern I have there, with this capture, there's a lot that is sets between Main Street and Depot Street.
let me go to
It's
the,
not fronted
On Mill Street.
Now, it may be like, what, Acme Investments or who, and it's not who owns it, but just, let's call it Acme Investments. They may own 2 or 3 lots stacked, so that, but I'm not sure how that works.
so the lot itself would have to have frontage on Depot Street. So if there was some lot in
Yeah.
between that didn't have frontage, like this one here, does not have frontage on Depot.
So that wouldn't be allowed
So
there.
you wouldn't be able to do that, right? Now, so on this image, I put in some of the elevation numbers just to kind of prove that point, show it. I took these off
30 feet.
near map. So kind of along the whole stretch there, you see that same kind of 20 to 30 foot drop in elevation depending on which side of Depot you're on. As written, this would allow for the corner lots to also take advantage of it. So, the lot kind of down the hill from where we are on Grove and Depot, the Depot and Mill lot here, and then, even the Bow and Depot lot here or here, those meet the conditions of having frontage on Depot Street and not on Main Street. So they would be able to, as written, take advantage of it. I tried to keep it as more general as possible, and then if the board had any concerns, we could go from there. The one thing I did call out in the memo specifically was, if the board was really just mainly interested in promoting the development of those surface parking lots, you could add in some sort of qualifier that it's for lots with frontage on Depot Street between, West and Mill. If you were worried about, or not necessarily worried, but, you didn't necessarily want that 55-foot height applying to the lots, closer to Bow Street side. I guess also.
Does anybody know the elevation of Freeport Station
So I think
side on Depot Street?
the back side there, I think, is like
Backside.
48 feet.
48.
Yeah.
I think because of the way building elevation is
Yeah, the
measured,
way
it's
we
like,
calculate building height is you take.
I
like,
know,
the-
I know. So that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it 48? So if you had a 55
So
across
do
the...
you,
Even if you had a 60,
I think that's what I saw in the plan, but
even if you had a 69, there, that'd be fine, but I think it'll be a problem down here, like, West and Depot,
Assuming that it was built to plan, because everything is, I believe that corner, corner on Depot and Mill, I believe was about 47 or 48
Where the movie theater is.
feet, where the movie theater was, yep.
that's what the elevation
That
plans.
would go
from
all the
here
way
for
down
show.
Depot there across from Petrillo's, right?
Yep,
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit higher on that entrance, maybe.
maybe, not much.
Yeah, not much, but a little bit higher there.
I think it's a decorative corner.
Yep.
Let me see if I have a couple other.
I think it should run from West Street right to Bow Street myself.
I'm with you, Andrew. I think those other properties could be.
So what was that comment? I
I
missed
think
it.
it should run from West Street to Bow Street.
from west to Bow. Okay,
If you're going to put it
so,
on Depot Street, just,
yeah, so
So,
that's
in
how
other
it's,
words,
that's how it's written right now.
Don't change it. It's, the way it's written right now is good to go, in your view.
Right.
now is that, and that's both sides of Depot
Yes.
Street, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Yep, frontage on Depot,
All right.
any which way.
I have a question. What is the height limit in the other districts aside from VC1?
I think it's 35
35
feet.
in most districts. I think the C1 allows, in some cases, you can get up to 45. But I think most of our districts are 35.
So this is the only district where we'd even be able to go to 55?
So the way we measure height complicates the whole thing because you go measure that average elevation, go like a third of the way up if it's peaked, blah, blah, blah. But we do on Main Street, some of the backsides of buildings from the ground up measure actually pretty high, like the former Cole Haan building where Under Armour is, I think is about 55 feet from ground up. Obviously, it's a lot lower on the Main Street side, but where you see the slope, the front side of that, I think is about 48 feet.
There's a whole story exposed on the backside.
Yeah, the back of that is pretty high, but those were some numbers that we had from when they came, we looked at building height there for when they came in to do another project. I mean, we also have a lot of buildings that are shorter, but just for some.
But you're saying the backside of that building is 55 from the parking lot?
From the ground up, yep, I believe
Ground
the
up.
back, ground up. I mean, there's now a big parking structure behind it, so you don't feel the impacts, but just to give you some spot.
So, just to follow up on Wayne's point, the max building height in the VC2, which I think is the long mallet,
Yeah, like Harris to
is
get in.
45 feet, but it still has that 3-story limitation, which is, I guess, how the VC1 previously was. But yeah, most other districts are in that 35 range.
There's stuff all over to go look for.
Oh, the VC3 also has the
Story,
45 foot, yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason, I think we didn't change, I'm stretching a little bit, so don't hold me to this, but I think part of the reason we didn't mess with VC2 was that there was kind of this bigger mallet drive redesign in the works.
Yeah, that's fine. But when it's done, that's
Right.
an obvious
Yeah, it's a-
place
it's
where
a-
you can
totally,
put a
yeah.
4-story building,
That
but
and-
not.
And all the commercial districts are obvious for.
Yeah, so I think, the idea is after we take a look at some of that C1, C3 area in the fall, then come back to the downtown area to look at some of the other village district zoning changes. Yeah, that VC2 area along Mallet Drive, there's, should it be just lumped into the VC1? There's a number of questions there, right? Do we
Yes.
get rid of the story limitation, because right now, those are conversations that we can definitely have going forward.
It's those kind of questions that make me, I'll support this because it's progress, but it makes me wonder why we're being so specific about Depot Street, because I don't think we're aware of every potential site where something might be built. And, VC2 is another example of, it's just not getting the same opportunity. Why don't we just,
So the idea
be
here,
more aggressive about increasing building height so that we can get some affordable housing?
In the dog bone as well, 45 is overly restrictive for what I imagine should happen there long-term.
I think the reason
This was
for
a quick
this.
fix.
This was it was a quick fix, but it was also, and it has been informed by 5-7 years of discussion about this specific neighborhood as like, here's the thing we can do with very little discussion. The public has identified this as a prime spot. We don't need to do much public outreach. That has been done. We have.
But your idea would require.
yeah, the idea was that
conversation.
this was specifically called out in the downtown vision plan as being vetted to some capacity, whereas, like in the comp plan update, we talk about increasing building heights and reducing minimum lot sizes in general all over the growth area, but we haven't kind of fleshed out publicly specific ideas. Do we want that to be 45, 55? Like, what's the number? So we would probably do a little more public outreach as part of that, whereas this was a kind of something that was a little more well-established.
We almost did an overlay on this district like in 20
There's also an ask from the council to us to specifically address.
Correct. It
this
was part of
place.
that work plan that the council kind of sent.
Yeah, so Sam's right. We did look at possibly doing a parking lot overlay district in some of this area and changing the height. That didn't go forward for other reasons. Then in 2021, we looked at height and the VC1, the VC2, and the VC3 based upon a recommendation that came from FEDC. We got quite a bit of public comment at the meeting, and a lot of residents came out in VC2 and VC3, and they were against the 45 feet at the time. So we had only changed it in the vision, I mean, in VC1, and I think we had a story restriction. Year later, during that time, we were working on the downtown vision plan and had since made additional changes with a lot of focus on this area. And we do know from calls from developers, this is where people are looking. This is the zone where there's a 0 land per dwelling unit, which the other zones don't have yet. So VC1
Yeah,
is appealing.
yeah, it's the other districts need more work aside just from building height, whereas
Yep.
the VC1 is pretty much set in terms of ready for projects to come in, aside from, this potential improvement.
Yeah, we've already lowered the parking requirement, we've lowered the land per dwelling unit. We're soon to fix design review, and the height's the one thing we continue to get
And we've done
feedback on from developers to make it cost effective. Now, what the magic number is, that's a policy decision, that's up to you guys, but we've gotten a lot of feedback during the downtown vision on this geographical area.
Yeah, and there's also the issue of whether public feedback from people that already live here is the final word, because, there's a lot of people that would like to live here, and Freeport should be a welcoming place to other people who do not yet live here, and it should be a lot more affordable for those people. So, I think we should consider
It's
that.
NIMBY if you only listen to who's.
Exactly.
That's,
Right.
Exactly.
that's a point
It's a-
we've been making on the board for years and years, is we should be thinking also
But
about the.
can,
I think the downtown vision was reflective of all views of our communities, our residents, our property owners. We actually had a lot of tourists weigh in and a lot of people that work here. So I do think that we had a lot of opinions, but, based upon the public process, it's quite often who shows up.
I mean, I think we had a lot of support for that from the downtown vision.
Yep.
I didn't see any, well, it might have been there, but I just don't remember a lot of negativity about building in this area.
No, not at
the
all.
point
on
of doing this right now is we do have public support. It's, or if any objections come out, we can bat them down by saying there is broad public support for this.
Well, at some point, we have to say thank you very much and move forward.
Right, that's
You
right.
know, I mean,
So-
because we can be bogged down in all kinds of things. I mean, not that we should dismiss their input, but we should, we're here to make a
I think
decision.
it has
that's
been decided
For the
already.
future of Freeport.
Right. To me, it's in the rearview mirror, this decision. We
Yeah.
just haven't, however.
And I don't, if, not to stray off the subject, but Mallet Drive, I don't know, there's only like one lot that was even, left to be built on. That's the one when you drive around McDonald's driveway. So, I mean, there's not a lot
Well,
up there.
there's lots that
waste
could
of
be
space that is.
redeveloped.
My
But it's not a lot of them.
Yeah.
But things can be rebuilt over time, too.
Well, of course, but I don't think it should be a priority right now.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great priority. So I think we all are broadly in agreement that this is a good change. There's much more to come. Mitch,
for it.
you identified a couple
I
questions.
have two questions. Question number one is why 55, and is that the right, just a little background on, is that the right number? Should it be 60? We've toyed, I don't think it should be much more than that, but we've toyed with 55 or 60.
Yep.
And before you answer that question, let me bring up the second question, which is, let's assume 55 is the right number. So are we prepared to have a 69-foot, that's a 7-story building, because they'll bury the bottom floor, and it will be affordable housing. We'll have a project in the middle of town. That's what we will be enabling. I understand the need, I understand the public support maybe, even for that, but let's be eyes wide open.
Is the
I doubt
a
it.
clarifying question on the process there, because, I forget the number, 1829, because LD 1829 is already law, that means the moment the council takes our recommendation and puts this into chapter 21 of zoning, that means that somebody could come in the next day.
Okay, and say, I'm building a
I'm gonna do this,
17-story
and I'm
building,
taking-
and you can't even
Is that true?
design review it.
No, so we have a year, as of now, we have a year to implement the changes from LD 1829.
Okay,
So
that's useful to know.
I don't, it's not part of our ordinance right away. So in that year, I think we would have kind of continuous updates. Is that standard going to stay the same? And will we end up having to put that into effect, next June or July? Will there be some amendment to that, that says something to the effect of, communities that already have a building height of X square feet don't have to do this. This is designed to,
With fewer than 10,000 people.
tackle those communities that only allow a 30-foot building. We want them to be higher, but, we understand, I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen, but, maybe it could. But so I don't necessarily think that just because that's looming and out there, that should impact this decision. Because in the future, like let's say 8 months from now, we're ready to implement the changes of LD 1829. If we had to do that at the time, we could always come back and revisit this then.
We could lower it back down.
Yeah.
In the meantime, no project would go in at 70 feet because
Right.
it hasn't been implemented, and we could at that point lower it back
The
down.
gate could be open for 5 projects.
That
in
wouldn't be a
time.
taking at that point?
Right. I think, yeah. Yeah. And I think to answer at least with my understanding of the 50, your question about
Yeah,
the
the first
55. The
question.
first question. I think for what I've heard from people who have talked to developers and who know a lot more about multifamily construction than I do, is 4 stories is kind of a sweet spot in terms of efficiency, construction efficiency, simplifying engineering, so you're not getting into, a lot more metal and crazy engineering required from taller buildings. So that's a good thing to aim for. And then the extra height be above, so you can imagine, say you have 4 stories that are each 11 feet tall or whatever. Then you also need a little bit of extra height for rooftop mechanicals and that sort of thing. Or you can imagine the right project shoehorning 5 stories into that and maybe having like mechanicals in the center or something like that. There are different ways, but that seemed to be kind of the right mix of allowing a certain category of projects that seem likely to be feasible in town without putting it so high that we are scaring people, I think, with the possibility of a big building that people, at least a certain proportion of the town, doesn't want or is nervous about for, I think, understandable reasons. And then also it's relatively unlikely maybe that we'd get those anyway, so we're probably not really doing a lot of damage by adding that protection of the 55 as opposed to like, do whatever you want. Put up a 100-story building if you can. So that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, 55 seemed to capture the allowance for some 5-story buildings.
That allow them to have underground parking?
Yeah.
So you can still have 4 or 5.
4-story and
you could-
underground parking, you could do that.
You could dig a crater and
Yeah, you
put
could
as
do-
much under there as you want, I think, right? I mean,
That can be expensive.
right, yeah, unlikely that somebody would do that, but
No,
theoretically.
but I mean, if they go into the banking down there, maybe they could drive in and have underground parking and, and have ground level on the tall side of the hill.
Right.
And,
Yep.
it might be nice to have underground parking.
So is
So I'd
it,
say we haven't heard from anyone interested in development at all that, they want a 60-foot building and that.
Wait till they find out they can have one.
Well, but so, 55 seemed to, raise up, it went to 45, got rid of the story allowance to allow for this 4 stories. So bumping that up to 55 seemed like a reasonable increase rather than jumping straight up to 60 necessarily. But if the board really wanted to go up to 60 for some reason, I don't think it's out of the realm of discussion.
I'm trying to put as many positive spins on 1829, did I get that right that time, as I can. And I think we almost get an interesting sort of year-ish period here where we have this 55. So theoretically, somebody knowing this change is on the horizon, somebody could start planning a project that has that, say it's 67 feet, you know, and they could they could come to the town and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. I know this change is on the horizon. I'm getting ready to hit the ground running on June 21st of 2026.
This is why I don't think you'll be able to undo the 55 feet very easily.
But I think if we hear that, hey, a lot of people are really curious about this, then we know there's something there and that the height limit, people really do want to build taller height, which is just a useful bit of information, I think. You know, I think it's.
I'd be surprised if somebody builds
I would be too.
I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I for what it's worth, I think the 55 feet is a good compromise for Freeport, because this still, I mean, yes, we want to support housing in town, we want to welcome new people, we want to make it affordable. We are still a small town. Like we are still a town of
preserve
fewer
the
than
character.
10,000
There's all
people.
these vision pieces that we're trying to balance.
And it's right, it's a balance, and so I feel like 55 feet is the right balance.
Yeah, we couldn't get a 3-story one built next door, so I'm not going to worry about a 4 or 5-story one.
And I think that's, you know, that has, for better and for worse, informed
Crazy.
my thinking on building heights too. Is like there is a real
And he met the requirements.
subset, and that was a 30 whatever foot building. So there's a very much a part of the community, again, for I think understandable reasons. There are people who want things to be smaller and lower, and
Taxes be higher.
yeah, totally, yeah. I mean,
That'll change the
I
makeup of
think one
Freeport.
thing that most of the planning board, I think, was at Jeff Speck's talk, or at least several people
I
were at
watched
Jeff
it.
Speck's
I
talk
watched it.
last week, whenever that was, 2 weeks ago. One thing that I thought was really interesting there was hearing how the taller buildings closer to the street help with traffic calming and creating a sense of place that is really, and I had not really thought about it that way before, and I found that sort of encouraging of having taller buildings, and rather than making it feel like, okay, if we're going to have these taller buildings, it's going to feel like the financial district in Boston or something. Or I haven't been there in years, but it used to feel, you know, like you have empty streets and huge tall buildings, and you kind of feel like you're in the middle of this crazy, I don't know, sci-fi movie or something. Compared to a small town, I think there is a real potential that if we get some of these taller buildings and they're built up closer to the street, that we have a sense of place that still feels like a small town. I mean, you know, Andrew, you say all the time, there used to be lots of really tall
Oh, there
buildings
was.
in
There was.
Freeport, residential buildings. I mean,
Oh.
there's a chance that with these changes, we get back and actually move in a direction that makes it feel more like a small town,
You know,
even
the block
if
where
it has
Put-
50-foot
The
buildings.
block where Patagonia was had 3rd floor on it. Got knocked off after the fire. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of tall buildings. You look at the old pictures.
So,
What was the
anyway.
tallest building in town?
Ooh, well, I suppose at one time it was the church that sat right where LL Beans is, was quite a tall building back in the day before it burned down.
How big was that?
Pretty big, set up on the hill there, and they had a spire, you know, big tall spire.
More than 55 feet?
Oh, but
Beans seemed taller,
yeah,
too.
yeah, Beans was a 3-story building, you know, up off the street as well, because you had to go up on top of the rail, they had to get up in. It was an elevated sidewalk, so that was probably 4 stories from the street. Had a truss on top, it was so big, you know, and yeah, there were a lot of big. Shoe shops were big. You know, shoe shop had a 4-story tower on it, probably, elevator, and you know, it was an industrial town in a way. You know, 5, 6 shoe shops.
So for me, it's a long way of saying I'm excited about what this can bring to Freeport, and I think it's a good sort of, I know it's incremental, but it's a good change, a good incremental.
Sam, to back up your point about buildings close to the street, I just keep thinking of Exchange Street when everybody complains about, you know, it's parking on both sides of the street. It's one way, of course, but it's parking on both sides of the street, and it's this side, you know, it's right on there. Now, they're not 5-story buildings, but they're tall buildings. You walk around the old port, and, you know, people drive around and around and around and try to park on Exchange Street, and it's slow, and people poke along, and, you know, everybody fights to get a spot down there in the old port somewhere. And yeah,
That's where they want to be. That's
and I'm not afraid of that stuff, you know? There's no reason to be afraid of.
I don't care for all the expansive parking lot we have down there. It's
Yep.
got to get filled in, some of it.
So
Yep.
it's all good.
Any other thoughts?
So what would be the process for going beyond this just depot street limitation
So
in the future?
So we'll start in the fall, talking about the C1, C3 rezoning changes. So building height is obviously part of that. So we can look at it in those districts. And then
And the other,
post that, we would come back to the downtown area and start looking at some of these other village districts. So the other village commercial districts, VC2, VC3, 4, do we lump some of those into the VC1 so they just take on these standards? Are we just changing some building height, minimum lot size, setback standards uniquely in those districts? I imagine once we came back to the village, we would probably take a kind of holistic look at all of the village districts and kind of lay them out next to each other, all of the standards, and see where there's overlap, see what could be combined, what, is kind of uniquely different. And then, building part would definitely be a part of that
What would be the
conversation.
timeframe on that future work?
Probably, I think the current work plan we had went to March, was it? And, now we have LD 1829 sprinkled throughout there that potentially, so I don't know, starting early spring, maybe?
I think the other exciting part about that is when we do get back to the downtown area, we will have a new comp plan. We will have design review updated, and we will have whatever spec Dempsey comes up with for suggestions for how to rework our streets too, which I think can all inform the zoning changes that we consider. So that, we're not going into it the way we have
Right.
with the same, constraints for years about wondering like, well, what happens if we do, we will have more guidance from, more planning in place and more information to base our decisions on.
And one more question. What, is there any process whereby we hear what developers are interested in? I mean, first of all, did they get notice that these changes are being made in some way?
So at the staff level, people call about, conceptual ideas, projects, ask what's going on. So I think those conversations, Brett has a lot of those conversations. I have some of those conversations.
Because maybe a little short report about those conversations would be interesting for the planning board, I think.
Yep. It is a balance of how much people are willing to talk about a project that isn't necessarily,
Yeah, I know it's informal discussion at that point.
I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, we do-
In a sanitized way, Brett, you could give us feedback of what you're hearing.
Maybe put out a survey.
Yeah, we'll have a good opportunity through the build-out analysis that we're doing with the PPI, the Division Corridor. A good opportunity to understand a lot from there. And I will say too that, when staff recommends policy changes.
Wait, Brett, sorry, you're gonna get in trouble here do you have a mic?
All right.
We can hear you, but
Yeah.
Tom, no need to come. I got your back.
I was just going to say that, we have an opportunity with the build-out analysis coming through the Village Corridor Initiative to really facilitate some of those conversations and aggregate information in a way that will be helpful. I also think, when we craft a work plan at the staff level, we're understanding what the opportunities and needs are, and we're prioritizing policy moves within that work plan. So we're aware of a lot of interest on Depot Street right now. This is an important move, and it was prioritized early in the work plan because it's going to lead to action that we've all been working on for a long time. So
So when you say there's a lot of interest in Depot Street, is that in part because they know that's where we're moving and not in other places?
It is, definitely. Yep, and that 55 feet, if you haven't heard it yet, I think we have, that's critical to making some of these projects go. So the move you're making tonight, there's probably a few people watching and paying attention, and we'll have good conversations with them early next week.
And maybe developers should know that we intend to move in other places too.
Oh, yeah. I think we're trying to spread that word through word of mouth. But we're also, if you've seen a few of the newspaper articles recently, there's very positive quotes from counselors saying we're pro-housing. They're talking about policy moves. So we're trying to have that in direct dialogue, but we're also trying to make sure that we're spreading the word through broader means.
Yeah, I'll say that, there's a reason that, staff's recommendation, part of that work plan, was to look at the C1 and C3 areas next and not necessarily some of the surrounding village areas. People come in occasionally, with concepts in some of the village areas. It allows for some, development opportunities right now, but, there's people potentially interested in, that gateway area and a little south of there. And, we hear ideas of, things that people might be interested in doing, and it's just completely, unfeasible to do right now. So the work plan that you saw, that council saw and was on board with is, kind of enforced by some of the conversations and feedback we've heard from the development community.
So do we need a public hearing on this?
Yeah, you should open and close the public hearing.
Is there going to be a public hearing right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Do you want to move to open it, Mitch?
I move to open a public hearing.
All right, all in favor? Excellent.
There's no one online.
There's no one online? What are all those? I can't see that far.
No, those are the panelists. So that's all like Tom stuff. And
All right, well,
but if you go here, there's no.
is anybody, right, you're not, you've already, yeah, okay. Yeah, we know where you stand. Fair enough. Mitch has moved to close.
I move to close.
Second, all in favor? Let the record show we did hold a public hearing. Great. Do we have a motion? We do, right?
Yeah,
Kyle,
so there's in the staff report, the motion.
Yeah, a draft
And then there are 2 points that I called out in the analysis section that sort of support the finding that this would be consistent with the current comprehensive plan.
Right.
Because that's really what we're going off of here. So yeah, that's ready for anyone interested.
A motion that the Freeport Planning Board recommend to the Town Council that the zoning text amendment, to Chapter 21 zoning ordinance regarding amendments to Section 413 Village Commercial VC1 to increase the maximum building height allowed for lots along Depot Street to 55 feet. It's consistent with the Town of Freeport Comprehensive Plan's vision for the future, in that it would continue to be a desirable place to live and allowing a variety of neighborhoods and housing types, and as well as the notion that taller buildings are another way to minimize disturbance of land while allowing growth and development.
Second?
Second from Andrew, all in favor? Excellent. All right,
Don't argue.
very much unanimous. That was a long time coming. I think it was a great discussion. I appreciate everybody's time and interest in it, and I'm excited about everything we have ahead of us over the next, well, probably forever, but let's say year. So now I have navigated away from my agenda, but I'm pretty sure we are on item 5, persons wishing to address the board on non-agenda items, which I suspect will be a quiet bit. Item number 6, anyone need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
Second from Bonnie, all in favor? Excellent. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.